Hello again. The big story on Action News this evening is the return to the Delaware Valley of the reputed godfather of organized crime here. Nicodemo Scarfo of Atlantic City was released from federal prison in Texas today after serving most of a 2-year sentence for illegal possession of a gun. Scarfo, who's seen here in some file footage, was released 8 months early for good behavior. He's expected to return to the area later this evening. Even while in prison, federal officials say that he was the man in charge of the rackets in the Philadelphia and Atlantic City areas. Action News reporter Kathy Gandolfo has put together a special report, a chronicle of the mob activities that led up to Scarfo's alleged dominance of the local mob.
On the night of March 21st, 1980, reputed organized crime boss Angelo Bruno was murdered as he sat in his car outside his South Philadelphia home. Just about 1 year later, Philip Testa, the man police say was Bruno's successor, was killed in a bomb blast at his home. According to Pennsylvania and New Jersey investigators, the man who ascended to power following Testa's death was Nicodemo Scarfo. Prior to this, Scarfo was allegedly the Bruno crime family's man in Atlantic City, overseeing loan sharking and illegal gambling operations. Scarfo, who lives on Georgia Avenue in Atlantic City, served a 6-month prison term in 1964 for manslaughter, and he served 2 more years for contempt for failing to answer a crime commission's questions. In 1980, Scarfo, his nephew Philip Leonetti, and Lawrence Merlino were acquitted of murdering a Margate contractor. However, Scarfo was sentenced to 2 years for possession of a weapon, for which he has been paroled after 17 months. Since the death of Angelo Bruno, at least 21 reputed organized crime figures have been killed. Lieutenant Colonel Justin Dentino of the New Jersey State Police is an expert on organized crime activity in the state. He says Scarfo continued to run the family from his Texas jail cell.
Through the history of organized crime, that even though a boss is in prison, that any homicides that occur would not occur without his approval.
Dentino says Scarfo associates Phil Leonetti, Lawrence, and Salvatore Merlino are the men who carried out all of Scarfo's orders. With Scarfo out of jail, Dentino says lawmen will be tailing him and will maintain total surveillance on him and his close associates. Dentino expects that Scarfo will flex his muscles and make sure that everyone knows he's the boss and in total control, and will eliminate any resistance.
I believe that there'll be a few more homicides that will occur relatively quickly to eliminate any remaining pockets of resistance. And then in the future, I believe that there'll be a continuation of violence within the Scarfo organization, because he is a violent-prone individual. He has surrounded himself with violent-prone individuals, and he doesn't need too much of an excuse to kill someone.
With most of his opposition...
On January 20th, 1984, Nicky Scarfo was released from the federal prison in Latuna, Texas. His nephew, Philip Leonetti, headed a contingent waiting to greet him at the prison gates. From there, the Scarfo entourage drove in rented luxury vehicles to San Antonio, where they spent the night partying in a posh hotel. Scarfo was 55 years old. He had been boss of the Philadelphia family for just 34 months. He had spent 17 of those months in a hot, dusty federal prison in Texas. During his brief reign, 16 mob members or associates had turned up dead, their bodies dumped in empty lots, left in the gutters, or hidden in the trunks of cars, all over Philadelphia and South Jersey. Now Nicodemo Scarfo was back on the scene. The Riccabini War was over. He had consolidated his power. There were problems, to be sure, but it appeared the era of violence was coming to an end. His enemies were either dead or in prison. When Scarfo was released from prison, in 1984. He was the undisputed king of the Philadelphia underworld, and SALVIE Testa was the mob's crown prince. Testa, who at 28 was the youngest mob capo in America, had learned the ways of Cosa Nostra from his father, but he had come into his own during the bloody reign of Nicky Scarfo. As he strode out of the airport, Scarfo was flanked by Leonetti on one side and SALVIE Testa on the other. Testa walked just behind Scarfo and to his right, a position that seemed to symbolize his place in the organization. "Salvie, this guy, he'd never ask you to do something he wouldn't do himself. He was right out there with you." But in 1984, after risking his life to solidify Scarfo's hold on the underworld, Testa badly miscalculated his status within the organization. He thought he had proven himself. He figured that his loyalty was beyond question. In Bruno's day, that certainly would have been the case. But Scarfo played by a different set of rules. The very attributes that made SALVIE such an asset during the Riccabini War, his leadership and his fearlessness, turned him into a threat after the war was over. He was a guy made for this thing. He fucking loved it. He lived it. And he was bitter. Real bitter about what happened to his father. About the way his father got killed. Fucking blown up with those fucking nails. SALVIE personally killed the two men responsible for his father's death, Frank "Chicky" Narducci and Rocco Marinucci. He made no attempt to hide his satisfaction in those bloody acts of vengeance. SALVIE used to say to me, "I wish that motherfucker was alive so I can kill him again and again and a fucking again." This is how much he hated that fuck. He had no mercy on anybody. Business was business, and killing to him was business. When Scarfo came out of prison, he and Testa were respectively the king and prince of the Philadelphia underworld. But in less than a month, Scarfo would turn on his young capo, and in less than a year, Salvatore Testa would be dead. The reason? Just before Scarfo's release from prison, SALVIE broke off his engagement with Maria Merlino, daughter of underboss Chucky Merlino. Caramondi, recalling their bitter argument in the restaurant several months earlier, was not surprised. SALVIE really didn't love Chucky's daughter. But being the underboss's son for 25 fucking years, he was close to being to the top. So one day he goes to Chucky, who is now the underboss, And he says to Chucky, "I'd like to go out with your daughter." Take her out. Before long, they were engaged. But they decided to wait for Scarfo to come out of jail before they married. By that time, Salvie was in love with another girl, and he didn't want to marry Maria. When Nikki came out of jail, he thought Nikki would take the brunt of his not marrying Chucky's daughter because of what a good job Salvie had done during the Riccabini War. He didn't know Chucky the way I knew Chucky. Me and Charlie White knew Chucky all of our fucking lives. He's a very bitter guy. He took the broken engagement as a personal insult. I'll never forget the night Salvie and Joe Punch come into this bar that we used to hang in. I'm sitting at the bar and Joe Punch says to me, "Salvie just told Chucky he's not going to marry Maria." From that moment on, I knew he was a dead man. Salvie. Over the next few months, they built up this thing against him, saying he was going to start his own fucking gang, that he was fucking around with drugs. Chucky got allies to convince Nikki that Salvie had treason in his mind. But all these things weren't true. Salvie was dedicated to Scarfo. He worked 24 fucking hours a day like a fucking dog for the guy. That's the way it is. See, we believe the organization comes before our own family. Before our own kids. Before life itself. The badge is first. This thing of ours, Cosa Nostra, it comes first, before anything. And when it comes to problems, like the Riccabini War, or somebody means to do us harm, wants to hurt the family, it's all out. That's the way it was for Salvie. But Salvatore Testa, as schooled and savvy as he was about the ways of Cosa Nostra, badly miscalculated when he figured Scarfo would back him in a dispute with Chucky Merlino over the canceled wedding plans involving his daughter. Whether Scarfo truly sided with Merlino in an affair of honor remains an open question in the Philadelphia underworld. There are those who believe that Scarfo, like some tribal chief, feared a Testa-Merlino alliance and was only too happy to hear that the marriage plans were off. And seeing the young Testa as his eventual rival, Scarfo had no problem being convinced by Merlino of the need to avenge his daughter's embarrassment. Nikki didn't take the brunt. What happened was, Chucky started recruiting Fafi and Tommy to help him tell Nikki about Salvie's wrongdoings. He's doing this. He's doing that. They're creating stories. Fucking lies. This is the viciousness within. Now, there's something in it for Fafi and Tommy. Get rid of Salvie, and they become capos. I had many conversations with Chucky. He used to come over to my house to drink wine. He'd say, "You know, I'm not mad because he didn't marry my daughter. If he would just take himself down a notch, start the fuck over as a soldier, he would be forgiven. This thing comes first. If he didn't want to marry my daughter, he could have did it a different fucking way." You see, the wedding was all planned. Salvie canceled out 2 months before it was supposed to go. They had bought gowns and they had the church. They even bought special tablecloths. There were going to be well over 700 guests. But despite Chucky Merlino's protestations, despite his argument that all Salvie would have to do was take himself down, relinquish his title as Capo, and become a mob soldier again, Caramondi knew Philadelphia's mob prince was about to be permanently and fatally dethroned. We knew it was only a matter of time for Salvie. Salvatore Testa's fall from grace in the spring of '84 did not go unnoticed within the Philadelphia underworld. The first sign came during a benefit dinner for a local charity at Palumbo's restaurant in South Philadelphia in April. Around the same time, the Wall Street Journal was heralding Salvie's rise. Nicky Scarfo took a table for himself and his top associates at the affair. Salvie was told to sit somewhere else. Then, about a month later, Scarfo and his entourage took a trip to Puerto Rico. Salvie was not invited. Salvie realized something was amiss, you know? He sorta got vibes. The order for the hit came down about that time. Caramondi and Charlie White got the ticket. One morning, Tommy comes around and says, "You don't know what the fuck happened last night. We had dinner with Nicky, Chucky, Philip, Lawrence, me, and Faffy. Faffy, this motherfucker, he fucking buried Salvie. This guy, he's gotta go." Me and Charlie looked at one another, and we knew. It was no fucking surprise to us. Later that day, or the next, Chucky Merlino came around to see the Crow and Charlie White. Merlino was standing out in the middle of the 1800 block of Camac Street. Caramondi, Ianich, Del Giorno, and Inarella walked up and gathered around him. There they were, the mob underboss of Philadelphia and 4 of his top soldiers, standing in a huddle in the middle of the street, in the middle of the afternoon. They met like that because, in the wake of the Riccabini violence, they feared police surveillance and hidden listening devices. They knew that even their own clubhouses could be bugged. So, when important business had to be discussed, they would take a walk down the block or around the corner. They figured, while they still could be seen, they wouldn't be overheard. Chucky's standing by himself, and we get in a circle. He says, "Salvie's gotta go." And he puts his fingers towards the ground, like the sign of the gun. Nicky wants him dead. Too much fucking treason. Getting too fucking big for his britches. And he's fucking around with drugs. This cocksucker has to go. Then he turns to me and Charlie and says, "Get any ideas?" At that meeting, it was decided that Salvie's codename would be Brownie, that Caramondi and Charlie White would be responsible for the hit, and that Del Giorno and Inarella would supervise. Try to come up with a good plan. And be careful. Now let's go get this fuck. This was early in the spring of 1984. Summer would nearly be over before SALVIE Testa was dead. Part of the problem was Salvie. He was a difficult target, always on the alert, and those stalking him knew he'd be willing to shoot back. But another cause for the delay was Scarfo. The bloodthirsty mob boss preferred to see his contracts fulfilled in public. Nicky liked cowboy style. He didn't like walk-ins, where you take a guy in his fucking house. He liked broad daylight, restaurants, or busy street corners. Anything cowboy style. He liked a lot of noise to fucking scare people. He figures that way there would never be any witnesses because nobody would ever come forward, testify against us. And after, he'd like to see a lot of publicity of the murder, headlines and television. Salvie knew this. He always said Nicky liked the wild, wild fucking West. And the more noise, the fucking better. So, Salvie, he was real cautious. This fucking guy, he just felt bad vibes. Every time you shook his hand, he'd bring you in close with his right and pat you down with his left from behind to see if you were fucking strapped. Now, with the warm weather coming, it was pretty hard to carry a fucking gun. We just have to stash it somewhere and bushwhack him, you know? Sneak the fuck up on him. And it's a little tough for us because we couldn't station ourselves in front of Salvie's house and wait for him to come out. I mean, He's gonna know we're the guys that's gonna do the shooting. It was going to have to be a spot he wouldn't fucking expect. Because by this time, he was very, very alert. He's doing his regular business, you know. He knows there's something wrong. This fucking guy. He suspects he's gonna be killed. He just can't figure out who's going to do it to him. And as he looks the field over, the guys around him, he sees Joe Punch, his best friend, and Gino Milano. But these guys weren't told about it. The only people that knew were Nicky, Chucky, Philip, Lawrence, Charlie White, Faffy, and Tommy. And me. At that point, the only way Salvie could have saved his own life was to disappear. But that, apparently, wasn't in the kid's makeup. He could have just taken the fuck off. Me and Charlie used to talk about it. We don't know why this fuck didn't just leave. We would have loved to have told him. But we couldn't. You know what I mean? We couldn't. He was the kind of guy, if he knew for sure, would have went after Chucky or Nicky and tried to kill them. This fucking kid would have went down in a blaze of glory. But he wasn't sure. You know, he was aware. He was fucking alert. He just wasn't sure. For the next 5 months, Caramondi, Charlie White, and eventually several other members of the Scarfo organization stalked Salvatore Testa, looking for the right time, the right place, to kill Philadelphia's mob prince. Attempted hits were set up to kill Salvie at various locations, including a South Philadelphia health club where he worked out, a beauty salon that he owned, mobster Faffy Inarella's house where a baby shower had been scheduled, a mob gathering at Tommy Del Giorno's condominium on the Ocean City boardwalk, aboard Salvie's boat, which was docked in Ventnor, and an exit ramp in Northfield, New Jersey, coming off of the Garden State Parkway. Caramondi considered the Pier 30 Tennis Club down by the Delaware River waterfront, where Salvie played on a regular basis. But he rejected that spot as too risky. Heavy traffic in the area would make a getaway difficult. And because of the way the tennis courts were laid out, Salvie would be able to spot someone before he could get off. A good shot. He looked at Salvie's girlfriend's apartment and the neighborhood around it, at a vacant store at 9th and Christian in South Philadelphia, where Salvie was building a new clubhouse, and at a barber shop owned by Salvie and frequented by many mobsters. Nicky, Philip, and Lawrence used to come up from Atlantic City every 10 days or so to get their hair cut and get a manicure. Tommy thought about luring Salvie there. Me and Charlie had guns and a car ready. We were supposed to walk in and fucking blast him. But they could never get him there. The first serious opportunity presented itself that summer when Fafi Inarella's wife, who was pregnant, was going to be feted at a baby shower. So Fafi's wife was going to be given a big shower in the Italian custom. People come and bring gifts. It's like a party. So Fafi runs into Salvie on the street, and Salvie says to him, "Congratulations. You're about to be a fucking father. You gonna be home tonight? I'd like to stop by, bring over a gift." So Fafi says, yeah, we're gonna be home. What time? So now we see a golden opportunity. Me, Tommy, Fafi, and Charlie, we get together. But Chucky intercedes, and he says he wants Tori Scafidi to do the shooting, to be at this house. Because if me or Charlie were there when Salvie rolls up, he might not want to come in. But being that Tori Scafidi hangs with Fafi, it would look normal for him to be there, because Fafi had bought a house and he was remodeling it. It used to be Pat's Burrito's fucking house. Anyway, Tommy says, "I got 222 pistols with silencers. You got a place where we could practice?" So I say, "Yeah, man, come the fuck over to my house, in the cellar. I'll be there at 6 with Tori. We'll practice. Because sometimes the fucking guns jam. You gotta watch the way you pull the fucking triggers." At 6 p.m., Tommy and Tori come over to my house and we practice. We were using homemade silencers, but those little motherfuckers, they worked pretty good. After we shot a while, we decided the guns were okay. So right then and there, we tell Tori what to do. We knew Fafi was waiting. We said to go over to the house and stash the guns. Put one upstairs and one downstairs. But make sure they're accessible. We tell Tori and Fafi to hang outside the house. Pretend like they're fucking working on it. Once Salvie gets out of the car and onto the porch, Fafi would say, "Come on, let me give you a tour of the house, man." Then, when they get him inside, Fafi would distract him and Tori would get the gun. So, that night, Tori goes to Fafi's house and they're waiting outside. Me and Tommy go pick up Charlie because we gotta take the body away if he does get him in the house. We were waiting in the neighborhood about 2 blocks from Fafi's house. We waited until it got dark. Salvie, he never showed. So we decided that we would do it the next night. We waited. Again, this motherfucker never showed. So the following day, Salvie bumps into Fafi on the fucking street. He gives him the baby gift right there on the street. That was the end of that fucking plan. After the opportunity offered by the baby shower didn't pan out, the shooters shifted their attention in the opposite direction. Joey Ponchatore's aunt had died. Everyone, including Salvie, was expected at the wake, which was to be held at the Cato Funeral Home on Broad Street, in the heart of South Philadelphia. Joe Punch was Salvie's best friend out of all the guys. He's also a made guy and was one of Salvie's top guys. So there was no way Salvie was not going to come to the funeral parlor. But Salvie knows about funeral parlors because we were going to shoot Sonny Riccobini in one. 2 days before the wake, we made our plans. Me, Tommy, Charlie, Tori, and Fafi. Chucky wanted Tori to do the shooting and for me and Charlie to be blockers inside the funeral parlor, just in case anybody tried to interfere with Tori's escape. We'd push into them and help him make a clean getaway. He would just drop the fucking gun in the parlor and walk out. So the day of the wake comes. 11 o'clock that morning, we receive a phone call to go to Chucky's house. Me and Charlie. Tommy and Fafi are already there. Chucky says, "This fuck. Tori got himself arrested this morning. He won't get out of jail until late tonight. Nikki's gonna go fucking berserk. I don't know what we're gonna do." So we're just listening, and he's waiting for Nikki to come up from AC. Finally, Scarfo comes in with Phil Leonetti and Lawrence Merlino. We sit at the table, and Chucky starts to tell Nikki the story of how Tori got locked up at 5:30 in the fucking morning after being drunk, and that he's still in jail, and that they'd hold him till maybe late tonight. So Nikki says, "These fucking kids are irresponsible." The plan goes on as we said it would. He looks at me and Charlie and says, "You two guys ready?" We said yes. And then he says, "Okay, that's it." That night, Fafi picks me up. I get a .38 Magnum. Charlie's got a .38. Tommy picks up Charlie at his house, and Fafi picks me up at my house. About 25 after 7, Salvie's outside of the funeral parlor with a couple of other members milling around while waiting for Nikki to come. Me and Charlie got our guns. We had jackets on. We're trying to stay away from Salvie because we know about the frisks and we need to be careful around this guy. So we're talking to other members and trying to stay away from him. About 8 o'clock, Nikki pulls up with Lawrence Merlino, Chucky Merlino, and Phil Leonetti. We're standing on the top of the steps. He greets some people when he gets out of the car. He walks up to the top of the steps. He looks at me and Charlie and he says, "Yous two ready?" We said yes. We go inside the funeral parlor. We pay our respects to the dead. We're looking for a spot and we're looking for some kind of signal. Charlie's on one side of the room. I'm on the other side of the room. We notice Salvie looking all around, constantly looking. And we're waiting for some kind of signal from Tommy or Fafi to give us the go-ahead. A short time later, I was told to go upstairs. There's a lounge area there in the front of the room and a bar. It's got 12, 13 stools. Salvie's sitting at the end of the bar. He's talking to someone. I walk right next to him. I get in position right behind him. Nikki and Chucky and Philip are 10 feet away from me. I'm looking directly at them. They're against the wall. Chucky's standing there, and I motion to him with my head up and down like, let's do it the fuck right now. But he waves me off. So, when he does that, I go to the lounge and I sit down. We were all fucking tense and I couldn't understand what the fuck happened. I mean, I was right the fuck behind him, ready to fucking shoot. He's talking to some fuck at the bar. All I had to do was fucking pull the trigger right in the back of his fucking head. Then 10 minutes later, Tommy and Fafi comes over and they tell me there's too much law outside. Too many fucking cops. I mean, here's Nikki. Here's the fucking boss who wants you to take out a guy, whack him out right the fuck in front of him. It's fucking unheard of. But these fucking guys, they were so crazy that it even goes further. When we leave the funeral parlor, we all go downstairs outside and we're saying goodbye to everybody, members and non-members. I'm standing with Nikki, Chucky, Philip, Tommy, Fafi, and Charlie. Now, when Salvie says goodbye, he shakes hands with all of us. Chucky Merlino shakes his hand, grabs his head, and kisses him on the fucking mouth for like 10 fucking seconds. Tommy, Charlie, Faffy, and me, we look at each other and we're all thinking the same shit. What the fuck? This guy's fucking nuts. Salvie's gotta know now. That was the fucking kiss of death. We looked at the expression on Salvie. He was sort of stunned. He just couldn't figure out what the fuck was going on. This is how fucking crazy they were. I mean, they wanted him to know. If Salvie suspected he had problems before the punchatory wake, Merlino confirmed them with his kiss. Now it would be even more difficult for Caramondi, Ianich, Del Giorno, and Inarella to set up and carry out the hit. One time, I'm down by the shore, and Leonetti says to me, "This motherfucker. I'm getting sick and tired of fucking looking at him." It was constant fucking tension. There were a lot of fucking attempts on this guy. We were in the casino, either the Playboy or the Sands. Me and Charlie, we're sitting there with our fucking guns, looking to shoot him. Right there. Right in the fucking casino. That's how desperate they were near the end. Tommy was supposed to bring him in, but Salvie didn't show. This guy, he didn't trust no place.